We are back after a 1-week hiatus, and there's quite a bit to talk about. Minnesota Vikings released their NFL draft behind the scenes video. There's some interesting things that we can take from it, plus an update on the salary cap. And the Vikings have a little bit more wiggle room than we might have thought prior. Let's talk about it here on the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show, sponsored by friends at Underdog Fantasy. My name is Tyler Forness. With me, as always, in the top left corner, he's producer Dave. Dave, you got your situation all set. It looks nice.
Yeah, it's about 75%, if that. But yeah, it's getting there. Starting to.
75% is still 75%. We'll take that every day of the week. So let's have a conversation. Not a lot going on in the world of the Minnesota Vikings. They still have not extended adofo-mensah yet, which I'm guessing is coming any day now. I'm honestly surprised it hasn't gotten done yet. I really don't think it's anything, especially when Kwesi talked about it. He's like, I've been so focused on other things. It'll get done when it gets done. Whatever. Just kind of nonchalant about it because there are more important things than him extending that contract because he believes it's going to get done. Mark Wolf also said, I believe it's going to get done. So really not concerned about that. But it is something to keep monitoring. And when it does happen, we'll be able to have that conversation at that time. The other interesting thing is OTAs really haven't started to ramp up yet. They do so next week. I think the Vikings made the OTA schedule with me in mind specifically because they have OTA practices on the 27th, 28th, and 30th, conveniently avoiding my wife's birthday on the 29th. So high credit to the Vikings for only considering me for their OTA practices. I am very appreciative of that, and I know my wife is as well. But not a whole lot going on. It's May. All the rookie contracts are signed, and that's kind of where we'll start today. Let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings salary cap situation. And when we look at Over the Cap, which is the foremost expert when it comes to all things salary cap, Vikings have $14.227 million in cap space. What's really interesting about this number, Dave, is the fact that within that number, you have a couple things that still need to be done. One, the practice squad is going to take up around $4.5-5 million. Then you want to save about $4.5-5 million for in-season acquisitions. So let's say it's $9 million that you have to have set aside. The Vikings have $5.2 million to play with theoretically. Now, do they want to play with that money? Do they want to use all that money for somebody right now? Do they want to set it aside? Because what's really difficult is right now they're sitting at $53 million dead next year. They're not dead, over the cap. The only dead money right now for next year is Garrett Bradbury at $1.628 million. And that plays into the situation here 25. They're going to get that $1.628 million on June 1st at 3 o'clock. So, sorry, they get it June 2nd because it's a post June 1st cut. So you're going to get a little bit of extra cap space. Now, what's really interesting about the cap situation, Dave, is when you have extra salary cap left over at the end of the year, it rolls over to the next year. And it's also one of those things where you have to, no matter what, spend at a certain floor. And that floor is 90% rolling over 5 years. So if the salary cap over a 5-year period is $1 billion, you have to have at least spent $900 million on that 5-year rolling average. And the Vikings have really not had an issue with doing that. Now, you have a year like last year where they had $70 million in dead cap. They couldn't spend a lot of money. Well, this year they spent a lot of money. So it balances it out. And I'm not too worried about next year's cap space because this year's cap space, we're also going to see some interesting things as well. So what this ends up doing, Dave, is when you have players at the back end of the roster who are veterans, if they're second year guys, they're making a base salary $120,000 more than rookies. Or if you're a full vested veteran like Ambry Thomas, $1.1 million. That's a lot. That's a lot of money as far as like disparity. So 1.1 million, 840,000, that's $170,000 difference. Sorry, $270,000 difference. So if the Vikings cut Ambry Thomas and let's say, a guy like pick your rookie, Keenan Garber. Reason I picked him, cornerback. Cornerback for cornerback makes sense, right? You're going to save $270,000 in cap. So the amount of rookie free agents that make the team will end up making a difference. Plus, you have some rookies who aren't even included in the top in the salary cap right now. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins is like the salary cap ceiling right now for like where you have to at least match in order to be included with that salary cap space. Right now is Michael Juergens. Cap hit $987,185. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, $959,344 cap hit. So eventually when he makes that final 53, you're going to see that. It's going to immediately translate.
Well, it goes from the top 51 where we're sitting right now, computed, to the top 53 plus practice squad afterwards.
Yeah, but that's not even what I'm saying. I'm saying these guys aren't even qualifying in that portion. So once they make the team, you're going to save money. Same with Kobe King, same with Gavin Bartholomew. The only draft picks that are on there are Tai Felton, who's got a cap hit of $1.12 million, and Donovan Jackson, whose cap hit is $3.12 million. And those situations end up mattering. Like our backup quarterback right now, Sam Howell, is only making $1.1 million in cash this year. And those things are a big deal. Plus, you have all these guys who are given a ton of money. The Vikings gave a ton of money in undrafted free agency. 9 players receiving at least $200,000 in full guarantees. But there's an interesting thing that the Vikings have done over the past couple of years. The number $234,000, it matters for a very specific reason, because that is a full 18-week practice squad salary. So the Vikings gave multiple players $234,000 in full guarantees. That's not including the signing bonus. It's just base salary. So Tyler Batty, the edge rusher, tight end Ben Urasek, cornerbacks Amaya Vaughn, linebacker Austin Keys, offensive lineman Logan Brown, and quarterback Max Brosmer. The Vikings doing that says, we expect you to at least make the practice squad. And if you make the practice squad, we're not losing any money. You're going to be making that for an entire season on the practice squad. So it's really not that crazy. And why, when you look at these numbers, it matters with context. The context is always king. And the Vikings have done a really good job of utilizing that to their advantage. Because, hey, now you have Logan Brown, who's a top 150 player on the consensus board. You bring him in. Yeah, Logan Brown only got a $10,000 signing bonus, but he gets $234,000 in full guarantees, whereas another team might have offered him like a $25,000 signing bonus, but only $100,000 in full guarantees. Well, yeah, you get a little bit less now, but you get a lot more later on. And that later on would be by the end of the NFL season, because that full guarantee is for the 2025 season. And I think it's really interesting how they kind of structured some of this, how they've tried to manipulate, I guess might not be the right word, but how they've tried to use the salary cap to their advantage by taking these guys and using them to create a really strong back end of the roster. You're not signing a Tyler Batty for all this guaranteed money because you expect him to be a long-term starter. You think he can be a really good depth piece for you. And depth pieces are important. To me, depth pieces win the Super Bowl, because you have two of usually the best team doesn't win the Super Bowl. It's the most deserving team. The team that wins their games wins the Super Bowl, right? That doesn't necessarily mean they're the best team, because like in the NFC, like the Eagles they arguably weren't the best team, but they won the Super Bowl. You could argue that Kansas City wasn't even the best team in the AFC, but they made the Super Bowl. So those things all matter. And I guess my entire point is when you have two great teams playing in the Super Bowl, you have Saquon Barkley. You have Patrick Mahomes. At a certain point, it's just two great teams playing each other. Great players will always make great plays, but the lower end of the roster will lose you games more than the great players will win you games. That's my belief. Having a strong back end of the roster is more important than having major superstars, especially in a game like football, where it's 11 on 11. It's more about not having major weaknesses than just having these superseding strengths. And yeah, nobody's going to say no to having a Patrick Mahomes. That would be stupid. Of course you want Patrick Mahomes. Of course you want Saquon Barkley. But having a player on the back end of your roster, having a Marcus Sherrills as a punt returner could win you a Super Bowl. Why? Don't make mistakes, and they can give you a return touchdown in a big situation. How much is that guy worth? A little above the league minimum. But having those players on your roster matters so much more than making sure you have a ton of superstars. Because special teams make special teams. And it's a cliche, and it's kind of funny. But at the end of the day, if you're bad in those areas, it will lose you titles. It will lose you big games. But if you're really good in those areas, it can take you over the top, and you will beat a team that you shouldn't have beat in the first place. That's why I really appreciate how much adofo-mensah is investing in the UDFA class. Because the Vikings having a guy like Ivan Pace Jr., having a special teamer like Bo Richter. Like, Richter was great on special teams last year. Those matter. They factor in. It's great to have. Those things will make a championship team more than J.J. McCarthy throws for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. You're never going to say no to that kind of production. You're never going to say no to Justin Jefferson potentially breaking 2,000 yards receiving. But if Justin Jefferson has a great game, but your punt returner fumbles the ball in the fourth quarter in a tie game and you lose by 3, who cares what Justin Jefferson does? That doesn't matter. Because the back end of your roster has to hold their weight. And that's why taking these kind of opportunities, especially with what the practice squad is now, where you have a lot of space. It's 16 deep, 17 if you keep the international pathway player, who is free. I mean, you still have to pay him a practice squad salary, but he does not count towards your practice squad. He also doesn't count towards a 90-man roster. So giving a guy who you fully expect to make the practice squad, and let's be real, they also expect these guys to make the team, is really reassuring that they're taking this, one, seriously, and two, they really believe in their talent development. I will say, what's fascinating to me, Dave, is these players are guaranteed, no matter what, to make more money than Kobe King and Gavin Bartholomew, who were Vikings draft picks. Tyler Batty, Ben Urasek, Zmaya Vaughn, Austin Keys, Logan Brown, Max Brosmer. If any of them are cut tomorrow, they will make more money than Bartholomew and King due to the nature of what 7th round contracts are. Kobe King, 201st pick overall, a $54,000, 767 signing bonus per year. That equates to about $218,000. Gavin Bartholomew, $53,956 signing bonus. That equates to around $216,000. Tyler Batty is guaranteed to get $259,000 with a $25,000 signing bonus and $234,000 guaranteed salary. When people say that I would rather go undrafted than be drafted, that's why. No matter what, you're getting more money in your pocket. Now, none of that's going to matter. The second they make the team, they get a few paychecks, it cancels out. But it's fascinating that players who are drafted get less money than players who aren't from a full guarantee perspective. Because, Dave, one of these guys could get in a car accident and break their neck, and they can't play football anymore.
We went through that last year. We don't have to go through that again.
I'm sorry. Maybe that wasn't the perfect analogy, but the point is, if something were to happen and they don't get anything. Now, the Vikings did do 100% right by Kyrie Jackson's family, and they paid out the full signing bonus. They did not. They did nothing to try and recoup money, which legally they are allowed to do, because a signing bonus is technically money that's paid for. You just get it early. It's paying for your 4 years. It's salary. But structurally, it's just different. And like when Chris Borland retired after being a 3rd round pick in, I think it was 2006, maybe 2007. Great rookie year for the 49ers. But this is when like the movie Concussion came out, when we were starting to really have these in-depth, uncomfortable conversations when it comes to head injuries in the National Football League. He decided after year 1 to retire. He's like, no, this isn't worth it. So what did the 49ers do? They're like, all right, give us our signing bonus money back. So he had to give it back. And that's something you are allowed to do. But the overall point is, if something extreme happens, these undrafted players will make more than that same thing happening to a 6th or 7th round pick. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, his signing bonus is nearly $500,000, so it's not going to matter for him. Like, he's already been paid more than an undrafted free agent. But at a certain point, you have that. And let's actually let's talk about where that point is, because now I'm interested. So Tyler Batty's $259,000. All right. The cap number for the last pick in the 5th round is $920,000. The prorated bonus is essentially $320,000 total. So that money is more. But you kind of take a look, scroll up, you're looking at needing to be up to like Pittsburgh at pick 185. You're looking at a $248,000 signing bonus. That's still less than what Tyler Batty was getting. Like pick 181. Now you're looking at $260,000. 181 would be the threshold. Pick one anywhere after pick 181. If Tyler Batty was taken, he would have given guaranteed less money. Plus, one interesting thing about being an undrafted free agent, Dave, is you get to do your schedule, you get to negotiate a contract extension after year 2. Because the way the rules are written with rookies is, if you're an undrafted free agent, you can only sign a 3-year deal. If you're a draft pick, they're all 4-year deals. And the way the rule is written is you can start to negotiate a contract extension after or going into the final year of your deal. So Ivan Pace could do that extension right now if the Vikings so choose. But they have 1 year of restricted free agency. So the Vikings don't have to do anything. They can just play it out. So I think it's really interesting to kind of look at some of this stuff and kind of parse it all out. And I'm probably going to write about the draft pick scenario, because I find that very, very interesting, especially considering
cutoff points about 181. That's going to be interesting in the future when potential draftees are looking at.
So this has become a Viking strategy. Now, a couple years ago, they did give Andre Carter a total of $340,000 in guaranteed salary, more than the practice squad. They expected that guy to make the roster and make an impact long term. It didn't happen. He was a weird body type that needed to grow a lot. He needed to bulk up and get big boy NFL strength. And what was really interesting about that was he never did. He never really was able to gain that. And when you have to do that Army training versus NFL training, it's just different. It's just different. Some breaking news here, Dave. This is kind of sad, but what's the name? Jim Irsay just passed away, the Colts owner.
Ooh, what is? In Minneapolis?
No. Well, I guess maybe the owners' meetings. I mean,
well, that's what I'm saying. And
I don't even know if he was there
tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining us and seeing the notification because, like I said, tweet did not go out.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I see it. Ari Mariov. That he passed away.
The Colts released a statement saying that he passed away peacefully in his sleep this afternoon. So,
in other words, he took a nap and
probably
didn't wake up. Very interesting.
Very interesting. Unfortunate. He had a quite the NFL career. He was a very eccentric owner, but he was incredibly passionate and he did a lot for the game. So we're not the people to really go in depth on his career. I recommend you go subscribe to the Indianapolis Star though and read Nate Atkins. He is the Colts beat writer. Tremendous writer. He's been on this program before. Also a great human being. I'm sure he'll have a ton of stuff that I recommend you go check out. Just as, Dave, I'm going to recommend all of our friends here at Underdog. Sorry, all of our friends here at Vikings First and SKOL. Go check out Underdog Fantasy. And it's a very, very, very fun time at Underdog Fantasy because there's a couple new games. They've got a basketball promo right now called The Extender. And they just dropped the playoff basketball promo. And with the extender, you can play your way to increasingly bigger boosts each round of the playoffs. Start a playoff series, you can do game one boost and continue boosting each subsequent game to unlock the next one. Longer the series, the bigger the boost. You're going to want to see how serious it gets when that game 7 hits. Hop on Underdog, the best place to make picks during playoff basketball and get started right now. And the best way to get started right now, Dave, is use that promo code FORNO, FORNO. Get up to $1,000 in bonus credits on your first deposit. And it's a lot of fun. I played game 1 with the Wolves and Thunder last night. Man, Rudy Gobert just needs to stop missing shots in the paint, and I would have nailed that. A lot of fun. They also have a really interesting one called Ladders, where you pick 3 to 5 players, and if they have huge nights, your odds keep increasing. So if you have Anthony Edwards over 26.5 points, but he scores 50, your odds significantly go up, and that rules. So there's a lot of different fun ways to play, plus the original way where you just pick a lineup of 2 to 8 guys. But you can have fun in a lot of different ways. Just make sure, remember, it is fun. And if you are concerned with your play at all, 1-800-GAMBLER will become your best friend.
Now, I heard last night, there was a bunch of grumbling about how the Oklahoma players would just barely touch a Wolf player, and they got the whistle.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he won the MVP today. Really good basketball player. Kind of a throwback to guys like Michael Jordan like the slashers of like the 90s who were great at those mid-range jumpers. That's kind of what his game seems to be. And I'm not a huge basketball guy, so if I'm wrong, please correct me. But that's the vibe I get watching him, where he's going to slash, then he's going to like pull up from like 10 feet. He's going to float it in. He's not going to be a guy who's just going to be this elite dynamic shooter. But you know what? It works for what that team is. It works for how they're constructed. But yeah, it's like if a feather touches him, it's like somebody hit him with a ton of bricks. It's very, very frustrating to watch. But I think that they're going to adjust. I think it might be an overcorrection in game 2. The Wolves need to take advantage of that. And this is going to be a fun series because the Wolves even said last night they were confused by all the defensive looks that they were getting. So get some film in. And this is where a 7-game series matters. And this is why I think the Wolves still have an advantage over the Thunder. They've been here before. They were here last year. Thunder's never been this far with this group of players. So I'm still bullish on the Wolves. I'm not going to say Wolves in 5, but it'd be sick. I think Wolves in 6 or 7 is still completely on the table. I mean, remember, they smoked the Lakers. Then they handled pretty convincingly the Golden State Warriors. But none of them really had a big guy. And they've got 2 big guys in Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren being the Minnesota kid, 7'1". He weighs like 200 pounds. He's just paper rail thin, but he's very, 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 very talented and a very unique style of player. But all right, let's have a conversation now, Dave, about this draft video. And I found it really interesting anytime that these end up like coming out from the Vikings, because look, and I don't mean this as an insult because they're promoting themselves and there's only so much they want to get out. You have to treat what NFL teams release as state-run media. And they want you to know these things. They want you to know certain things and not others. Okay. I got to address this, Sarah. SGA is not Michael Jordan. But those guys in the 90s and 80s who were major slashers, who would pull up, and who would attack the rim, like it's that style of basketball. Like that's the only point I was trying to make. And MJ was the only guy that came to my mind at that second because I'm not a basketball guy. But yeah, SGA is not Michael Jordan. Stylistically speaking, not a terrible comparison. They do some similar things. But it's an old school way of playing versus how you see guys now. Like Ant can drive, but he shot the most threes this year. He shot over 800 of them. So those things factor in. But back to the Vikings. It's state-run media. And that's not an insult. Businesses have their own PR. And the YouTube is essentially Vikings PR. So they're going to put out what they want to get out. It is our job to read between the lines. Our job to try and figure out some little things because there are nuggets in there. There's good stuff that we can read into. So let's talk about a few of those things. I think there's some really interesting stuff about Donovan Jackson. Some of the things that they mentioned, it sounds like they were just steadfast in taking guard. I disagree with that approach. I think it's an overinvestment compared to what you had on the roster. And we've hashed those points out, so we don't need to go into it again. But the way that this was presented to us tells me that they were really just zoned in on getting a guard. And the big turning points that they talked about were 17, 18. Kind of made it sound like Gray Zabel was in their purview as well. I also want to point out that I've heard that Tyler Booker really wasn't on their radar. So it was essentially like Zabel or Jackson. And they talked about it. And this next part kind of sounds weird because Kwesi mentioned, hey, start making plans with like teams behind us to try, like if we can't end up getting our guy. It sounds like that they weren't prepared for it. But Kwesi mentioned it later on in the video. And of course, we know that they prepare for all these situations. It's the way he phrased that made it sound like they weren't doing anything or they didn't do anything. I took it as, hey, Now's the time where we got to get these plans finalized where, hey, this happens, we have this ready to go. Because you have a limited window once you're on the clock. 10 minutes is not a lot of time. You have to have these conversations early. So if Donovan Jackson and Gray Zabel went at 17 and 18, the Vikings are probably on everybody's phone right now. This is what we want. And then they'll try and figure out the best deal. And then they'll 100% finalize it a few minutes into the clock. So that's the way I perceived it. And your mileage may vary on that. But this organization is way too calculated and smart to have anything else be the case. There's too much experience in that room now. Brian Grigson's a longtime general manager, front office guy. Rob Brzezinski's been in the Vikings front office for like 25, 30 years. And Kwesi, this is him running his 4th draft. They know what they're doing. Now, is the ultimate decision the right one? Well, your mileage is going to vary on that per team. And we're not going to really know for a few years. But you want to look at the process and how they handle the process. And I thought it was interesting kind of how those nuggets came to be. But there are two other things.
Remember, the video is selectively edited.
Dave, I mentioned that already. Yeah, it's state-run media. It's Vikings PR
department. They're going to show themselves in their best light.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point of this. But a couple other tidbits that were interesting. The Packers might take Donovan Jackson, which would have been really interesting. He kind of goes against everything that the Packers really want to do. But they kind of bucked some trends last year when they took Jordan Morgan, who projects inside to guard, but I think he can play tackle, but he's got short arms. Packers are huge measurable threshold people. So that was an interesting one. And then Kwesi made a direct reference to Donovan Jackson winning the Natty, talked about the confetti and how he wants him to be under the confetti here. And Ryan Grigson talked about how like national championship and high level play. That is important too. That tells you and really strengthens the point about Kwesi adofo-mensah and how he likes to draft from Power 5 programs. All 5 of these guys. I'm sorry, it's Power 4 now. I'm going to say Power 5 for the next decade, even though it's 4, because the Pac-12 being gone just still doesn't make sense to me. But not a ton that we can glean from the Donovan Jackson one, but I found it interesting how some of the things were phrased and how that could be interpreted not necessarily poorly, but incorrect, especially what we saw late in the video. That one about make plans, I think is the biggest one. Moving on to Tai Felton, I think the trade philosophy from Kwesi was really smart, and how he talked about it, and they talked about it because of the Sam Howell acquisition. They knew that they had a couple guys that they had targets on. They even talked about moving up to 118, like that range to get their guys. Kobe King was obviously one of their guys who they even considered at this spot, but Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins was ahead of him. And they wanted to have a bunch of picks, and they even talked to Seattle while they were on the clock. They're like, no, we're going to pick a 139. And then they made the move to get Howell by moving down from 142 to 172. And what's interesting is Houston offered 179 initially to go from 102 to 99. The Vikings countered, and they turned 187 into 142, which tells you that they had a lot of plans. They were concocting ideas in their, like with their spreadsheets and with draft picks to manipulate and get more. So basically the Vikings traded down from 97 to 102, and they got Sam Howell, 201 and 202 for moving down those 5 spots. That's a win. That's a big win. Then when it's all said and done. But it's cool to kind of see kind of how they're looking at things. And that insight I thought was really interesting. The Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins selection, and this goes like with the culture. Ingram-Dawkins sack dance needs to be cleaned up. Kwesi talking to Donovan Jackson about what his favorite song was. And I think having those conversations from other conversations, I think is really important. It builds that culture, builds that rapport. But Ingrid Dawkins said that they're going to pay teams for passing on him. And they talked about him being a hybrid 3 technique to a 6 tech, which 5 technique is you are squared up 100% with the tackle. And the 6 technique is your inside shoulder is lined up with the tackle's outside shoulder. So 4I is the exact opposite. Your outside shoulder's lined up with their inside shoulder. And I think that's exactly what he's going to be in the NFL. They talked more about him being more of a defensive lineman type of player, but I do think that he could stand up in certain situations. He did at Georgia, but I do think he's much more of a linear athlete, straight ahead. Not a lot of hip bend. Tai Felton doesn't have a lot of hip bend either, but they're good enough. Kobe King, I did find this one interesting. The 4th clip of him making a tackle is actually Ashton Genty breaking an arm tackle, which I found very funny. And to me, that screams, hey, this is a video editor that doesn't necessarily love football, which is fine. I mean, video editors need jobs. They'll take them wherever they can get them. But I thought that was really interesting. Also, the tight end cluster is what they were talking about when they were talking about all the trading and movement. The tight end cluster. And this is where, we talked about a couple weeks ago, the horizontal board. What does the horizontal board look like? When you have players that you're willing to select in certain areas, the horizontal board is a really big deal because, hey, I need a tight end. I want to get a tight end to this spot. Who do I value at these spots? Okay, well, we're at 172. I have, let's say it was 6 tight ends. Well, I love 6 tight ends. Are we going to really see 6 tight ends go before 201 and 202? Probably not. I feel comfortable enough trading back. And not only that, the Vikings also put a bunch of money into tight end in undrafted free agency. Ben Urasek, $20,000 signing bonus, $234,000 fully guaranteed. Bryson Nesbitt, $5,000 signing bonus, $75,000 fully guaranteed. They viewed tight end as a position that they liked in this spot, and they were willing to go and get guys in undrafted free agency to maximize that. And I do think that that is a really interesting philosophy. I also think it shows you that they were detailed, they had a plan, and they took Bartholomew, who also talked about how much Jordan Addison raved about him. Addison was a sophomore at Pitt his final year there when Gavin Bartholomew was a true freshman starter. Now, there are other reasons that Bartholomew ended up falling in the NFL draft and was a 6th round pick. But having a former teammate on the roster speak highly of you is an important factor. It's not the only one. You can't be like, oh, tell us why they're great and we're just going to make them the pick. That's not how that works. But you want to know, hey, who is this guy? Do we like him? Is he good? Should we take him? Would you want him as a teammate? Those kind of things are important questions to ask of guys who have played with those players. So Bartholomew, I'm not even convinced he makes the team. A lot of interesting elements, though, with this video. Overall, not a ton, but I did kind of get vibes. And I think friend of the show, Luke Braun, had the same ones. And maybe it was somebody else and I'm misremembering. Felt like the Tai Felton pick, they weren't 100% sold on, and they kind of wanted to move down, but they couldn't. So that was really interesting to me. But yeah, Vikings draft video. Some good, some bad, some whatever.
How many Rotten Tomatoes? 10%?
If YouTube had Rotten Tomatoes, I don't believe they do.
All right, I put it in the title, 90% fresh.
I didn't understand that when you put that. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. Now it makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. But yeah, that's the show. Not a lot this week. Go ahead, Dave.
I wanted to show the folks something, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
It is, let me load it up here.
Ooh.
That is
Did you make that?
No, I did not. Norseman did.
Very nice.
Woodworking, and I love the abstract background. It works. And do you notice it's the original Norseman facing left? With
Yes.
the longer horns.
Did they ever talk about why
They flipped it?
what do you call it? Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. Probably a league rule or some bullshit like that. But because we always know that there's only one team that has a left-facing logo right now, the Eagles. But this is the original one. And he is going to be raffling off 3 of those. And they're not all old school. For a friend of the network, Rap's dad, Todd, is battling cancer. And there'll be a Cash App set up. And if you wish to get into that, you're going to have to go over to Vocal Vikes channel. They're going to have a specific show and see that. And now what they're talking about is $10 for 1 ticket, 20 for 3, and 30 for 5. So if you have the funds available, it supports friend of the show, Rap's dad, and of course, our original moderator, Norseman. It would be a great benefit and make me proud if you do. And we'll have more on that when it comes out with the official Cash App.
Yes, we will.
And we are a community. And we like to support each other. And 100%. Not only, just as the community, and that we like to see all of us grow. So, and in this case, hopefully live long lives.
We agree completely. Dave, like Dave said, we'll have more on that as we get it, and we'll continue to communicate those elements. And otherwise, guys, that is our show. Monday's show is currently up in the air because it's Memorial Day and my wife's birthday weekend. Her family's in town. I'm letting her have a birthday weekend. Otherwise, she wanted to do a birthday month. I said no. I'm a hater. I said no.
I'm busy. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm busy, babe. Sorry. I got to watch this UDFA film. But we'll maybe have a show on Monday. We will for sure have one next week. Not Thursday, Wednesday. The show could end up moving to Thursdays on a full-time basis when that gets, we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
When that in-season schedule gets finalized or whenever a change gets finalized, you will be the first to know.
Mm-hmm.
But Tool Bloggers,
we'll have a Sal show coming up sometime soon. I know she's got a book guest, so there's going to be more Sal. But the deal with Sal is she's still down over the last season. She hasn't excited yet about this one. So if you talk to her, tell her JJ McCarthy and to be excited.
Yeah, I don't blame her. All right. That's our show. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell for those times when I am running late and it has to be pushed back 10 minutes. Hey, I wasn't throwing you under the bus.
That was me today.
But you can throw yourself if you want.
No, it was me today. I had the NFC North show earlier, and that ran long. And then, of course, I'm still unpacking. So, but we're all good.
Absolutely. And we will be back next week. And we will have a lot more with OTAs. We will have more discussion about the UDFA class. We'll just have a lot more.
And in the meantime, can always talk about Caleb Williams wanting to be a Viking again.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. In the meantime, thank you guys so much. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community. that we all love our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching the Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!